Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Guys, we have someone very incredible and I'm very extremely excited and humbled and thrilled to have this individual on. We actually connected via LinkedIn, and when we built a connection over, LinkedIn Messenger, just the way he thought, I knew that he thought and he spoke and he did things differently. And some of the content that he was pushing out, he was just going out there. He owns a limitless video production. But not only that, he's also been in the legal area for many years. And he is a huge individual in this belief that our goal is to empower others to develop and lead on their own, that all life is interconnected. And the dream is to inspire all others to aspire in a place where no chariots can take us. That was the thing that told me, man, this guy I need to have on our podcast to learn, to understand. And I am so excited to just share his story and where he's going and his vision for what he's got going on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Justin Higgins. How are you doing today, Justin?
No, I'm just kidding. Christian, you know what? I appreciate the kind words, and the pleasure and honor is truly shared, brother.
Thank you so much again. And I know I just shared a little bit about who you are, but if you will, just kind of fill in the holes. Who's Justin Higgins, man?
Justin Higgins is is myself. So I'm Justin Higgins. I'm the founder of Limitless Video Productions. We created Limitless as a way for other people to share their dreams and visions, and it's our mission to support those in any industry, or especially in the video realm, to tell stories, to report, to produce, and encourage. I'm also a father of 4 beautiful children with my wife, who I adore. And I feel like, every day that I wake up is a brand new day. And I'm just grateful for this life. And in the process, I've developed Limitless Video Productions and another agency called One Nation Notary, which seeks to be a service for the people, by the people. Beyond that, I'm a dreamer, believer, and achiever, and I truly believe the only one that can stop us is ourselves.
100%, 100%, and that's awesome. So now, a little bit, obviously, we were talking before this interview, and I would love to get more of the basis of how you came up with the word limitless. I know that really recently you've been really just going after that word, and I think that's really awesome because it's such a power word. So I'd love to kind of hear the background story of where you came up with Limitless.
Well, absolutely. Christian, it's a long story, so I hope you have time to strap your seatbelt on and enjoy the ride.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, I've been in the court reporting industry as a legal video notary, I've been, Limitless came up from a lot of pain, from a lot of experience, from a lot of understanding, and I still seek to get more understanding on what limitless is, even to myself, even as a word outside the agency. For the past 16 years of my life, I have been directly involved in the court reporting industry. Mm-hmm. I was a director, trainer, ran trials, jury presentations, extracting testimony, and presenting them in those circumstances. And I worked for a different agency for about 10 years. And this is how Limitless came to be. It's about 2 weeks before Christmas. And I called in for my schedule to see how the office was doing on that Monday. They notified me that I was fired. And, mind you, I have 4 children and a wife. So that was extremely alarming after you put 13 years loyally in with one company.
Yeah.
So this is where Limitless really started to explode. And it hadn't come up yet. And so what did I do? I didn't go right back into the industry. I didn't go right back into court reporting or challenge anybody out of anger. I sat and looked at my kids and my wife, and we prayed together, and just said, Lord, no matter what happens, I ask that you provide. The universe, God, whatever you want to call it. I reached out to them all, trying to make buddies, trying to let them know that my heart's in the right spot and I want to provide as a father. So I took all of my life's experiences, which prior to this, I always wondered why I never took anything to the next level, why I intentionally left it behind. And starting with, soccer, I played an Olympic development soccer team for the United States. And after college, had opportunities to play overseas and professional in Ohio. I didn't take it. I walked away and started playing music because that was another gift that I was given. So, and when the opportunity came to go to Orleans and sign, I left again. And I wondered why that my heart was so adamant about these decisions. Mm-hmm. What I've always learned is that I've been loyal to myself, and that's the most important thing. So coming back to the present and the situation where I lost my job, I just realized that I have to utilize all of my gifts to provide right now. I don't have any options to complain. If we complain, we remain. And it's really simple in life, and I'm a strong believer of that. We have to reach inside of our own self and connect with our own tenacity. Yeah, that's good. And within that, we find success. It's not something that we chase. Success is ensued. Mm-hmm. So I started playing at casinos, and on the weekends, and just pumping out probably 200 songs over the weekend of other people's songs after playing originals my whole life. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to my roots in soccer, and I said, hey, I want to train little kids and I want to ref soccer games. So I started reffing a few hundred soccer games every 2 weeks. It was relentless. It was horrible. But I soaked it all in. And I went into doing home repairs, and I was doing window installations. I was doing masonry. I was coming home exhausted. And I had this one soccer game and blew my whistle because this guy fouled the guy. It's what you do in soccer. You take someone out, you call the foul, you spot the ball, and you play on. No big deal. Just like life, you move on, something happened. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy, I guess, wasn't happy with the right call, and he came up, spit in my face. And, I turned the whole facility off at that point in time. I was so angry. But you see, Christian, I wasn't only angry with that guy. I was starting to get angry with life. I was starting to get upset with the universe and what it really wanted from me, So I came home, and I'm a man of faith, And I came home and I looked at my children that night, and we pray before dinner. And before we pray, all 6 of us go around and we say what we're grateful for. Mm-hmm. And all of my children went, and it just, it started just opening up my heart. And all I could think of was, things are really rough on me right now. And I don't want my children to see it. But it's important for us to show who we are when the time comes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where our faith comes out. That's where our humanity comes out. Mm-hmm. So it came my turn at the table, and I said, I'm grateful for the ability to provide. Yeah. And we started to pray. And I said, Lord, I believe in you. But my children, they don't know you. And I just started to break down. It was the ugliest cry you've ever seen in front of my children. That some guy they always thought was their hero, that's always, gonna crunch ends and make things happen. And I started to not waver, but I started to feel even deeper about my calling, my purpose, and to tap into all these potentials, Mm-hmm. And I said the simple thing. I said, Lord, I know that you love me, but I need you to show up for my children and also let them know that you love them and how real you are. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm praying for fresh visions. I'm praying for doors to start just swinging open, Lord. And I want to be used in anything that I do. I want you to be seen first. 2 days later, we made the decision to start a video production company. And it was something unbelievable. People have been telling me to do it for over 10 years. And I just laughed. I said, that's craziness. Why? I'm not a videographer, and I've been doing video for 10 years, but I believe what we do is not who we are.
Yeah.
My father told me, just because I'm a window man doesn't mean that's who I am, son.
Mm-hmm.
So I always took that in as a child, as an adult, and I brought that into my own being. So we started a video production company, and I hit some social media, and I told my friends, hey guys, I'm going to start a company. Christian, this was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. When we took it out and I said on social media, I'd like for everybody to know I'm starting a video production company, and I'd like for you to chime in and help me develop a name. And I said, but I want you to have a name under this premise, that the premise is I'm not going to be restricted to a box. I'm not going to be limited to Higgins Video Productions or Justin's Mega Media.
Yeah.
I said that what I do from here on out is going to allow me to go into all the avenues of life where video and production and encouragement comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody told me, not kidding you. Everybody said that was the dumbest thing I could do. My father, all of my friends, but there were very few. My wife really stood there and understood what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my family members reached out and she said, Justin, what if you named it Limitless? And it just shocked me.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it meant, but this came from someone that was extended family on my grandmother's side. And I was like, you know what? That's the name. And prior to that, we were thinking Limelight Productions, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So this is how Limitless came up. But just because you have something and you understand that why you wanted to have a name like that doesn't mean that's why you were gifted that name.
Mm-hmm.
Salvador Dali was interviewed by a newspaper, and they said, wow, you've painted these melting clocks and the persistence of timepiece. However, did you come up with something so creative? And his response was fascinating. He said, I find it hard to believe that a banker never ate the cash and took it home, just as much as I find it hard to believe no artist prior to me painted a soft clock. I think it's when we really accept who we are and what we're created to do, and we walk boldly under that image, that's when the doors really start opening. But it's not until that point. It takes fearless, it takes courage, it takes just faith and relentless tenacity. So that's why I say you got to tie into yourself. So that's kind of how Limitless came up to be, just taking it out into the public and saying, when I step back into video, I don't want someone to just see me as a reporter. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be limited to the expectations of other people ever again and be shoved in their corner. I was sitting in a very small room running litigations for over a decade, and but I go from that into playing music on my free time, and so that's how Limitless came to be. But definitely, I really didn't understand it in depth until later, Christian.
That is awesome, and I really appreciate you really opening up like that and sharing some of that. I know sometimes that's some of the most difficult, but I think our listeners really heard and obviously heard your heart in that. So I'm curious though, because what I've seen specifically in men is that when they get down in depth, what a lot of times they pull away. And I appreciate you sharing kind of what you did. You did something totally different. You just embraced the crap, you embraced the hurt, and then you brought your family together. Did you have like influence, or was that just something in your heart that like, this is what I need to do? And what caused you to like, I instead of pulling away and not talking about it, what got you to say, I need to bring it and pray?
Well, I'll be honest, I spent a lot of my life learning, and I plan to be a student of life until I'm gone. And I hope that the lessons that I've learned are a permanent impact for other people. And I hope that it leaves a peaceful legacy, but also a courageous, relentless, aggressive legacy. how did it, Christian, in saying that I've had some hard things happen to me in my life. I did not grow up in the best homes, and I kind of feel like I started to develop a personal relationship with God, if you will, as an extremely young child, So, and I feel like that I'm here and blessed with life because of such beliefs. I feel like without such beliefs, I would never know how to dream with my eyes open and escape the realities of the world and the hardships of life. So I've always turned in that direction. It wasn't even a debate, but it wasn't even a debate. So it was something continual, and I was trying to remain righteous as a human being in my beliefs. Just because you're righteous doesn't mean you're perfect, So I think what stopped me from all of those years prior was that I didn't know if I was willing or prepared to be a leader of any sort. And I think that type of doubt is what stops everyone from achieving their own potential. Doubt and fear, And when I learned that fear controls the world, but doubt is our own dream killer, And people can say, yes, you reached the finish line, but after every finish line is a starting line in life, So just like a race in life and dreams with landscaping our abilities and potential opportunities, it's a lifetime thing, I don't think that life is made up of journeys, Christian. I believe that life is the journey.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's what's so cool about you, because, I think sometimes the best leaders are the ones that don't want leadership, or maybe it's not that they don't want it, they just don't feel prepared for it. And sometimes it's like those are the best leaders because they're humbled, and that's where they can bring and really solidify and really create an incredible movement, if you will. And I think that's really awesome that you have those characteristics, And now, kind of going into like Limitless Productions, when we were talking on the phone, we were talking, obviously, one of the big projects you're working on. And I'd love for you to tell our audience just the vision behind that project, and as well as how that came about. I just think it's really, really cool project you're working on.
Sure. Are we talking on the documentary aspect of?
Correct. Yes.
Or the community outreach programs?
Well, I think the documentary on the homeless, I thought that was really unique, and how you're really opening up that. And I just think that's just an awesome topic to talk about.
Sure. So the justice system has always been a major passion of mine, Christian. And we're talking about, how did we get to the documentary? How did we get to Limitless? It was all these adversities. It wasn't bad that I lost my job. It was great. Curses can be blessings.
Yeah.
Sometimes life will shut a door intentionally that we don't have the courage to shut. And that's where faith comes in. Yeah. Do we have the ability to dream for others with our eyes wide open? Because some people have eyes that don't see and ears that refuse to hear. So my focus with Limitless was creating a financial foundation of opening up access to the justice system. And doing so, we started to pump out ideas into the industry, utilizing legal notary videographers and documentarians to extract the record, and then use legal transcriptionists to produce the written record, okay? Currently, there's a shortage in court reporters. That's what people believe. I just believe that there is a shortage of open minds that are willing to accept reliable, modern approaches, okay? Yeah. But that's where fear comes in. So we had an opportunity to get rid of Limitless. And someone flew me across the country. They're like, hey, this is your dream job. We would never even consider doing this for someone. When you get here, it's the Ritz. you know, I just said, I'll take the opportunity, but this is how the documentary came up, Christian. It's another winded conversation. So I can answer exactly how I was led to it, or I can just say what it's about. What would you prefer?
Honestly, just everything. Because I think you need context to understand the vision and the reason why you're doing the thing you're doing. So I would love to hear the story leading up to it, and then also your vision as well, about, you know, where it's going, what you see, because
Sure.
I think people need to hear that incredible story of the offer that you had.
Yeah.
And that whole story. So I don't want to spoil it.
No, I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to explain some of these things. I've kept quiet for the past 3 years and about myself. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity, Christian. You know, so thanks, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So how did this documentary come to be? I would say it's when I developed the company, rather than being a challenge to anyone, I approached the industry much differently than anyone else. See, everyone's trying to compete, even in life and in business. But I just see myself as a winner. You know, you don't like it, they hate us because they ain't us. You know, and it's real simple. I mean,
Yeah.
But so I created an agency which would call every other court reporting agency in the country, and we'd say, "Hey, check this out. Right now, you're giving this percentage away on your own job. What if I covered your jobs invisibly and developed and let you utilize my developed team to cover those same jobs with 25% more in the bank for you?" And they're like, "What's the catch?" I'm like, "The catch is that you're crazy not to take the pitch." And I was right. Within 3 months of starting this agency, Limitless, I had over 5 videos a day on the book within 3 months. And that's unheard of in the industry. You know, I had over, I think we were doing over 300 videos, half year, quarterly. I mean, it was just,
Wow.
I was just sitting there and I was sharing it with the public while it was going. I was saying, guys, you know, lights, camera, limitless, it's growing, you know. But just because we're doing the right thing doesn't mean that people won't hate us.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we won't be attacked. Actually, if you're being attacked, it means that you're doing something.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
some people like to use the words "don't rock my boat." I'm like, yo, shake my boat. I want to know how far I can go. I want to know how strong my boat is, and I want to know where the weakness is, so I can strengthen it, not only for myself, but for my employees, for everyone around me that sees me just as a character. So this documentary came soon hereafter, okay? The public was seeing our company grow. They were kind of ticked, but we were just a video production company that entered the industry without apology. And many people thought that that was just ridiculous. But the people that mattered were the ones that understood, you know, and that were willing to join the vision. At this point in time, we were just floating. We were doing unbelievably well. I mean, I had visions of buying a nice car that I always dreamed of. I had visions of buying a nice house for my children to have their own bedrooms. I mean,
100%, yeah.
you know, anything that any father would want and husband. That's what I was working towards. But perhaps I was losing it. And so I got this random phone call from these people across country. They said, "Justin, we'd like to offer you the opportunity of a lifetime, son." I looked them up. They're one of the biggest litigation agencies in the world, for that matter. And I took the first flight down there. Within 48 hours of the phone call, I was sitting in what they called the Ritz, you know. With all due respect, we won't go into that, you know. But prior to the meeting, I was sitting outside their office building, and there were homeless individuals all around. And I said, you know, it just really struck me deep. So the president from the company comes down during my waiting. The first thing he says is, Justin, I hope you didn't feed the pigeons. And I never would have thought a leader would be so cold. So I honestly didn't even know he was talking about the homeless people outside. And I said, I didn't even see any birds out there, you know? And he's like, dude, the homeless, bro. I'm like, oh, crap. You know, like, actually, I did feed one. And I spent time talking to him. He's like, you're crazy, man. So we took the elevator up. Long story short in this situation, the opportunity was to bankrupt Limitless intentionally and take over a job as a national director. I mean, with the big boys now. And my whole life was there. The car, the house, the bedrooms for my kids, the financial security. But one thing wasn't what I prayed for. You know, it's one thing to pray for something and not get the answer, and then you can accept that. But when you get the answer, should you waver from your own greed? Should you waver from what you know in your heart is the right thing for you to pursue? That's been the challenge, you know? So you get an offer for a couple million to intentionally bankrupt Limitless and take on jobs across the country. And they were extremely offended by the look in my eye and my voice when I said, but what about Limitless? You know, they could feel that concern. So by the time I woke up the next morning and I prayed that night, I was just like, Lord, you know, I'm doing everything that you told me to. You know, I'm scared, you know, because this is what also something I've been praying for, you know. And I woke up the next morning and after praying, if it's not for you, take it off the table. I woke up the next morning to a maid, because they have their own servants at this house. Yeah. Like, kind of like slaves. It was weird. I didn't appreciate that either. But what I noticed was she's here and all of a sudden a gentleman approaches me and he said, Justin, he goes, you know, I can't believe you. You know, I can't believe you. You know, he was pretty offended that I didn't take this job, but they had also pulled it off the table because they knew I wasn't going to waver from a vision that I received with Limitless. Yeah. You know, and we were driving immediately. I mean, I was there less than 24 hours, man. I got off the plane, talked to them in their car on the way back to their house and, you know, compound, whatever. And so he's driving me to the airport, this gentleman. Yeah. And he said, Justin, I just can't believe you. And I said, let me ask you something. You know, I understand you're emotionally attached to this deal because you're attached to your business who's offering it to me. I said, but if you were me, would you take it and bankrupt everything that you've created? And you know what? He openly said he wouldn't. And I respected that, you know. But what he said following that, and he goes, I thought you were the man who wanted the freaking Corvette. Which let me know that this guy had been reading stuff about me or reading my words that were hitting social platforms. Christian, I've always wanted a Corvette. And that's what I told the gentleman. He said, I thought you wanted a Corvette. And I said, you know what? Do you know why I want a Corvette? Because there was one man in my family when I was growing up. And he was the only dad that was there. He was the most fun individual I had met outside of my father. Yeah. And I said that he was also extremely successful. So I started to align success with kindness and leadership and setting a positive example. Yeah. And I said, you know, what I want more than the Corvette is to be the man when people see me drive that Corvette to say he deserves it. And, you know, I've always struggled with feeling worthy. I think everyone does. But steps in our life build us up to who we're supposed to be, you know? So I came back. I mean, I got on the flight, and I think I cried the whole flight home. I was super scared. I couldn't believe because it was like I got this prayer,
Yeah.
you know, but it didn't align with my heart and the other prayers that I had put out there. You can pray selfishly. Lord, I want $5 million. And the world could come up and say, here's $5 million to sell your soul. You know, so
Yes.
when I was on the way home, Christian, I made this one decision to not waver in my vision with Limitless, and to make sure as a leader that people understand, even when they work for me or they work with me,
Yeah.
that our legacy is more important than our currency, because our blessings come from the windows of heaven, not mere man or woman alone, because we already live in the shelter of one another. Life is interconnected, but when we start stepping out of those bounds, the dots are no longer being connected, you know? So
Powerful.
we're talking about how the documentary came to place now. So I came home, and they were pretty ticked off, first off, that I didn't take the deal. And I said, why be upset and cut the string when we can still tie a bow?
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding you. Before I got back on my doorstep in Columbus, Ohio, their business cards were right there on my doorstep, so I could network and run the business model that I was running in this region for them all the way on the coast.
They really wanted you.
Yeah. And now they're on websites and everything in Columbus, Ohio, because I'm their only guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I could develop a team in a second, because it's what I love to do.
Yeah.
But it really shook me that that's when legacy over currency came forward in my life, and it really changed me. It wasn't something that someone taught me. I mean, all of these lessons were hard learned, you know, I mean, extremely painful lessons. I mean,
yeah.
So we had other opportunities taking place at this time for myself and the company, but we also were starting to get under a lot of attack from people just pretty pissed off that some 30-year-old dude just came in here and started ripping apart the system and pulling at strings and being able to control the financial levels. And but I think that flowers don't grow on a paved path. So I'm picking flowers, man, for the rest of my life. You know, I'm picking flowers. That's how I look at business. It's how I look at life. It's how I look at love.
Yeah.
So
very good point.
Soon thereafter, that business interaction and the offer being put aside, kind of the worst thing happened ever. You know, I started wondering I started reading more, and I started plowing into the industry in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I read on Gandhi, okay? And I found out that Gandhi was an attorney before he was a guru. You know?
I didn't know that.
Studied in London, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, let's read about this. And Gandhi, after seeing the suffering around the world and the injustice in the justice system, he just threw his suit away, like, you know, and put on a toga or whatever those things are, right, bro? He became a guru, started speaking in the hearts of humanity.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, it just really shocked me. You know,
that's crazy.
It just really tore my heart up. You know, I'll be honest. There's no one in my industry, on my side of the industry for the reporting sector, that's talking about the willingness to create outside the box, to willing to do pro bono services as a court reporter. Is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, but you also have to be willing to pioneer. So this is where the next attack came. Okay,
mm-hmm.
the real big one. Stenographers were starting to get upset that our office was growing, and stenographers' offices that they were working for were upset because we were growing and challenging their business.
Yeah.
And in the legal industry, people will buy lemons just to hide the secret that there's another way, you know?
Wow.
And I think that that's something that everybody can learn in business. Yeah, you bought Jimmy's company, but Jimmy's company was failing. Why do you want to buy it? His client's going to naturally go somewhere anyway. So I always laughed at that thought, you know. Unfortunately, you have to let people sink.
Yeah.
You have to let things evolve. You know, innovation doesn't only stand for change with technology, it stands for change of the way we're thinking,
Yeah.
you know. So I started to innovate my mind, reading about Gandhi, started reading about all these incredible individuals. And I was reporting on a global litigation. And I took my family with me, only time I ever did it. And I came home, and this is going to get really personal pretty fast, okay?
Yeah.
So I'll just be pretty detailed about it for you then. Okay. So I was reporting on a case in Indiana. They said, Justin, we want you to come out of state and film this gentleman at his home before he passes away. And I said, it would be an honor, you know. So I came, shot the video in his living room the first day, and they called me on my way back to Ohio. I think I was supposed to be there for 2 days.
Yeah.
But they extended it after the first day for 5 days. And the timeline's important because I started on a Sunday, and I called my wife and I said, hey, hon, they've extended this job, you know. Why don't you come down and explore Indiana and just come out of Columbus for a while? Just put the cards down and enjoy life, you know?
Yeah.
And she was like, no. I was like, darling, like, let me put it a different way, babe. I said, I'm going to come to Indiana while you're working, and I'm going to party the whole time and explore what's cool here.
Yeah.
While you go to work. And I kid you not, within seconds, she was like, okay, come get us, you know? I'm not good. It was amazing. And I came back to Columbus. All their bags were packed, and boom, we're back on the road. I got to be on the record the next morning. So it was just awesome having them with me. I had pictures of the experience. It was shown, but it gets really dark really quick after doing my job and doing it perfectly like I'm desired and demanded. You know, there's zero room for failure in the legal field. You know, zero room, because you're dealing with people's livelihoods. So we pack up. We have a blast in Indiana when I'm off the record. It was great to see them just cutting loose and having a good time. You know, you have to remember I was developing this agency, and it was a grind. I was working for all these pimps in the industry, you know, for dollars that I should have potentially never accepted. But if you get a good business model, you run with it, and that's your foundation, that's your foot in.
Yeah.
And so we come back from this job, and lo and behold, we're looking at our house, and we're like, something's different, you know? And when we approached the door after parking, we could just see holes all over our house. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. Like, there's holes in the house. And then we step in the door, and there's glass everywhere. I mean, just glass. It was like a tornado blew out my windows, you know?
Yeah.
And under further investigation, we found out that our entire house was shot up.
What?
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Gracious.
And it's not something that I've ever shared with the public. It's not something that I've ever even talked to all of my friends about. This is not something I brought to social media, but this is what happened. And people were upset that we had come out with a different approach to reporting. And we were experiencing the worst. You know, it was over $20,000 in damage to my house. They shot up my travel vehicle, you know, they shot up the entire house. And I just sat there and thought to myself how we were protected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even in the midst of the plans of others, we were still protected. You know, there was in all of my travels, I never thought about asking my wife to come join me for an extra week, and my children. It was just like I was living with pure intuition. I was right where I was supposed to be. Always, I believed that.
Yeah.
And but I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. And then you know, I'm not here to say bad things about the cops, but their investigation was entertaining. You know, I had to videotape the whole investigation because the officer's laughing coming into the house. He's like, "Oh, looks like you had a party," you know.
Yeah.
He picks up a bullet and he goes, "Oh, here's your first souvenir. You can keep that one for your pocket." And he was not joking. Putting his hands all over it. I mean, I just could not believe it. I knew right then and there, even I couldn't afford justice.
Mm-hmm.
I had a court reporting company creating better access to the justice system, and still I couldn't afford it. You know. But what happened at that same point in time was when we released a new way to report to the industry with notary legal video specialists, it ticked everyone off. You know, I'm not kidding you, Christian. I thought I was going to get a pat on the back, like, he did it. He achieved creating better access to the justice system in a time where there's shortage of reporters. But like I said, there's not a shortage of reporters. There's just a shortage of a mindset and willingness to accept there are other ways. So I woke up. It was my, this is a year ago, I guess, 2 years, a year and a half ago. I woke up on my birthday in June, and I just had thousands of emails, thousands and thousands of posts all over social media talking about Mr. Stenoless. And I'm like, who's this Mr. Stenoless cat?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm like, what a name, you know? And I found out it was me they were talking about. You know, I looked a little bit deeper and I was like, oh shit, I'm Mr. Stenoless. I started freaking out. Like, we had like thousands and thousands of reviews out there that were all false. We had national reporting associations supporting their platform to unethically abuse their power and offer people the ability and the space to ruin my life, to threaten my livelihood, to threaten my family, to attack my business. And I just thought to myself, how is this happening right now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because when I went to bed releasing the ideas of Stenoless depositions, remember, I was expecting perhaps a pat on the back. You know, I understand you can't make everybody happy, but the majority I thought would have understood.
Yeah.
You know, so this is a time where people failed to buy us out, and now they wanted to end us. You know, but it was me specifically. It was a personal thing.
Yeah.
So from that day forward, it was my life changed, and Limitless changed. You know, although I had created Limitless to be many different things, I hadn't really gone after that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to have to be really creative. I had to reach into my own limitless abilities and not be limited to one way, to not be limited to the expectations of others. What I learned was that the destruction of others is actually the destruction of oneself. Mm-hmm. And the only way that we truly self-sabotage, Christian, is when we conform to the expectations and the opinions of others. You know, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you and force you to be someone or something else is the greatest achievement of all.
Mm.
You know, so I thought to myself, all of a sudden, my home's under attack. I look at my book, and all my clients pulled out. It was like a planned attack. I mean, it was unbelievable how clear as day it was. Even attorneys were reaching out to me saying, hey, we'd like to pick this up. We'd like to sue them. We'd like to go after everyone and make sure you're financially secure forever. I mean, we're talking about over 100 million I could have capped, still could. Yeah. Because we kept everything. It's nice to know who wants to be your enemy. We don't keep it to dwell on it. You keep things in your memory bank to remember what was and how things could be, you know. So this is really long-winded, and I apologize, but you're getting me to a very special thing in my life, this documentary.
We appreciate this rawness. I think this is just so awesome, and I'm just thinking of so many questions. I love to dive down and deeper, but just keep talking. I think this is just some awesome.
Yeah, I'm sorry
where you were and where you're now.
Yeah, but so here I am. I'm looking at my book. I'm looking at the holes in my house, and I'm looking at my wife and my children again, and we're back to ground zero, you know?
Yeah.
And I said, what am I supposed to do, Amanda? I'm so sorry, you know? I'm sorry for following my heart. I'm sorry for following my faith. I'm just sorry, and I love you, and no matter what, things are going to work out, you know? And she stood right there next to me and still stands there with me, man. And it's pretty shocking. You know, she's been a sword and a shield, and I can't thank her enough for being that in my life, you know? So she said, Justin, when we started Limitless, it wasn't to challenge anybody. It was to achieve little goals, which would add up to big goals. And she reminded me, she said, Justin, castles are built brick by brick. And I'm sorry, man. I haven't ever really gone over all this with anybody ever.
I appreciate you sharing, man.
And I just slowed down all of my pace, and I said, you know what, Amanda, I love you. But she's followed by saying that we had set this up for small goals and to not lose focus of those. We created Limitless to be an outlet to alleviate others from their limited ways of thinking. And we've created Limitless, our first foundation. I never thought, Christian, when I developed Limitless, that I would stop working my 5 jobs. You know, I never thought I would stop doing windows and masonry and roofing and siding and playing music at the casinos and reffing soccer games. I never thought that this vision would stop all of those things. I just had the willingness to go and the why to try, you know. So we created Limitless, and the foundation, my wife and I made an agreement that we're going to utilize the funds to provide for those who are in need. This is how I'm going to invest my free time into life and developing this company. So we created apparel for homeless individuals. We started, focusing on how that, being a voice for them perhaps. But this was the first time that we ever followed through outside the t-shirts, right?
Yeah.
So she said, Justin, if we're going to go down, she goes, we've already been down.
Yeah.
She said, so why don't we stand on the principles that we created? Why don't we rise and stand on the principles that we founded this agency on?
Mm-hmm.
And that was being a voice for others and being a heart for those in need, you know. So it was her idea. She said, Justin, why don't we start sharing homeless stories and about how they can't
Wow.
afford justice, how maybe their valley has fruit in it. Because there's something that I learned during these seasons since developing Limitless is that there's too much just to put my finger on one thing, you know. But I just started realizing that there's something else to this thing, you know. So I was scared. I stopped reporting for 9 months, and my agency was done. You know, I went on from making more money than I've ever made in my life to $25,000 in 1 year for a family of 6.
Wow.
So if you can imagine how that was, I mean, I'm talking about going from reporting on Enron to AIG to AOL to mesothelioma to mesh pelvic cases to literally about to be silenced.
Mm-hmm.
And I refuse to let my voice not allow others the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
So it was her idea. Let's go tell these stories. I'm like, all right, that sounds freaking amazing. It was brilliant. I just thought, whenever I need an idea, I'm going to talk to her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whenever I need a hug, I'm going to go to her.
Yeah.
So companionship is its loyalty, its humility, just like business.
Mm-hmm.
I had to reach out to my employees and say, hey, you know, I can't do anything right now, you know. And that was difficult, you know, but I had developed freelancers so they could dream within their own dream. Yeah. They could come to me and work with me, not for me, and be successful. Mm-hmm. So it started hitting the deck. We drew out a script on this documentary. It was to be a heart for the homeless. And it started off real simple. I mean, I just had about 5 questions, you know, tell me your story. How did you end here? But here's the most important one. Prior to this time in my life, I was always pretty hard to the homeless, you know, because life hardens you up. You know, you can start off the most beautiful, gentle child, but after life starts beating you up long enough, if you don't put your focus in the right area, hurt left unnoticed can turn to anger. So, you know, I was being broken as an individual from the second that we made that prayer to leave a permanent positive impact, and that was Limitless. Mm-hmm. So I know that my question was, when I'd see people on the ramp, was, you know, why the hell aren't they sleeping in the shelters, man? This is bullshit. You know, like, tell these people to get a freaking job.
Yeah.
I was that dude. I mean, you can ask my wife. I'd roll down my window. I'm like, hey, bro, you okay? He'd be like, yeah, why? I'm like, then get a job. You know what I mean? I was that guy. I'm not kidding. I was ruthless, man. And it was almost like I would challenge him to a fist fight if it came down to it. That's how mad I was that they were struggling on their own. And when I started to realize that, it turned my life upside down. How can I be upset with their circumstances without even knowing? Mm-hmm. How can I let anger control me? You know, so it's from all of those lessons that went into this documentary, you know, and I started to look at things deeper. So we hit the road. We started developing, and throughout that process, it went from just being a heart from the homeless to a heart for the homeless, the road to liberty and justice. Mm-hmm. See, right before I started this documentary, and after our house was attacked, I got called from someone that I would consider a friend. And even though we've shared very few words, he's become a very influential mentor,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me just believe that some people are just angels in your life for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But they gave me this opportunity to go serve in the congressional auditorium as a media documentarian. And it just opened up my eyes. I even asked them when they called me, I said, have you looked up my record? I was a drummer most of my life. I lived kind of on the road when I wasn't litigating. And they laughed. I mean, they said, Justin, we know everything about you. We'll see you in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't believe it, So I didn't question. I went. I stayed in Airbnb. I don't even want to go there. But I stayed in some place in DC, went and reported in the congressional auditorium in my minivan, parked in a senator's parking spot.
Crazy.
And I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I just looked around and I said, wow, what is this all about? I'm just keep going forward. To me, it's still not money. They expected me to send a $10,000 check. You know what I did? I sent a thank you note. I'm not kidding. It's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I just said, thank you so much for this opportunity,
See, that's what I love your story, man. I really just appreciate, like I just said, the rawness, and my listeners, I hope you were able to hear his voice and what he was going through, because it was just so impactful. I mean, here Justin, you're at a top where you were at the mountain, top of the mountain, $2 million deal. And you said no, because it didn't fit what your vision for Limitless. And then you went down to the depths of gracious, the valley, and that whole destruction and that devastation. And, I could hear your, there's just a terrible part in your life, but yet you utilize that as fire on the fuel, if you will,
yep.
Fuel on the fire. And so where you were able to just push forward, and now you're in a situation where, again, you're helping, and the vision behind it. And that's why I just respect that so much. I just think that's so awesome, and I think very few people ever actually get to the top of the mountain and then say no. And then they get down to the bottom and then they're like, you know what, I'm still going the hard way because this is my vision. And I am not, like you said, it's legacy, not currency. And man, how powerful that is. And when all of a sudden you become so clear and focused on developing your legacy. So let me ask you this.
Sure.
What do you want your legacy to be? When they think of Justin A. Higgins, what do you want them to think?
I want them to say, when I die, Christian, at the age of 200,
Yep.
I want them to say, he died too young. He had so much life left to give.
100%.
I hope that my children can see that their daddy did his best to show them what wisdom and understanding is.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that for all others, they can visit some of my journey and understand some of my actions and hopefully decide to be a person that they wish to meet, not complain about the person that they're forced into the present circumstances of.
Mm-hmm.
I said this earlier in the conversation, but I really, it's important for people to understand this. You need to learn to be able to dream with your eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And when other people see me and they think about my legacy, I want them to focus on 3 words: dreamer, achiever, believer. Because if we stop believing, then the doubt sets in, then the fear sets in, But fearlessness is the first step to leadership. I really believe that. And it's the most important step, because if we allow our fear to take over in all these situations will never even make the first step.
Mhm.
And we, at the same time, without being cynical, I'd like for other people to also understand this, that we can't expect for people, even the closest to us, to support or dream with us, or even see our vision. Even our own brain and our consciousness tries to stop us from things that it's uncomfortable with, just out of fear. But that doesn't mean it's not trying to protect us. It doesn't mean they don't love us.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope other people can see from my journey that the first step to being successful is believing in yourself.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to respect your time, and I just appreciate you being on this incredible podcast interview where we're able to just really dive into it. And I don't know, Justin, but I have a feeling that this is just going to be part one, and hopefully we're able to get you on again, because I mean, just the things that you were saying, I'd really love to dive down,
Be great.
what legacy and other things that you had to go through. And, I just think that'd be really awesome. But Justin, how can they reach, how can our audience reach out to you if they want to reach out to you, if they want to just, obviously consume your content, listen to more what you have to say, because obviously you're an influencer in your niche, how can they reach out to you, Justin?
Sure. And why do you say I'm an influencer? I think it's really important. Let me just extend your thought, my friend. Everybody's an influence.
Yes. Yes.
What's most important is that we ask ourselves, what type of influence are we going to be?
There we go. Wow.
So if you want to reach me directly, Christian, feel free anytime. And for any listeners out there, you can reach me directly at limitlessvideoproductions.com. Leave us a message through there, and I promise I can get right back to you. If you're trying to get in touch with me directly, just leave a note there saying such. Other ways to see some of our work would be on basically any social media outlet out there. The most important thing is I kept the name Mr. Stenoless, and I smeared it with who I am. And
I love it.
So rather than allowing adversity to break me, I utilized it for my advantage. So if you want to see some of my work and you don't go to Limitless and all that jazz, you can go to hashtag Mr. Stenoless, MrStenoless, Stenoless, Mr. Stenoless. And you can see some of my actions and implementations into society, and also the dreams that we're still producing. So I really appreciate everybody's time today, and I really appreciate you, Christian.
Well, thank you so much again, and listeners, if you actually go down to the description, we're going to actually have all the hashtag as well as his website, as well as, video content to show with you kind of what, he's working on. And so you can go ahead and down in the description there, check out him and obviously reach out to him. Highly recommend just connecting with him. But again, Justin, thank you so much. Let me ask you, is there anything, last few words that you want to share with our audience real quick?
No, I think I poured out my cup, but in life, you have to pour out your cup if you want it to be renewed. Yeah. So I encourage everyone to get out there, to love one another, and be relentlessly compassionate. Don't give up and believe in yourself. Einstein, I'll leave you with this thought. Einstein didn't say much to his children, and he always wished he would have. But he sent his son, Edward, a letter one time. And it said just a few words: never give up. Mm-hmm. That's all I said. Yeah. So, life's like riding a bicycle. You got to keep pedaling to stay balanced. So keep pedaling, everybody, and keep those dreams.
Thank you so much, Justin. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that is Justin A. Higgins. Reach out with the description below. And until next time.